They didn't just send me to a dead planet. They sent me to die of boredom on it. That was the joke circling the mess halls before I left. Dead Planet Richards. They'd started calling me. I'd pissed off the wrong admiral, questioned the wrong protocol, and now I was being launched into exile. Cosmic exile. To a planetary graveyard with no life, no mission, and, as far as anyone was concerned, no point. They called it XP 4327. I called it a 6-month sentence with atmospheric filtration. Colonel Wade barely looked up from his holographic interface as he slid the data chip across the desk. The cold blue light cast hard shadows across his face. Lieutenant Richards. Standard deployment. Observation post. Atmospheric control. Basic perimeter defense. You'll be the first and only person stationed there. I picked up the chip like it might bite me. Let me get this straight. I'm being sent to babysit a rock that's so lifeless it can't even support bacteria because I made Admiral Donovan spill his synth coffee in front of the Joint Chiefs. Way raised one brow, like a man calculating your odds of survival. You've got the essence of it, except for the dying part. That's optional. My transport touched down at dawn, if you could call it that. XP 4327 was a wasteland with 2 suns and no charm. The larger, bloated yellow sun hung low in the sky, while its smaller red companion blinked like a dying ember. The gravity was about 0.8 Earth standard, just enough to make every step feel like I was walking on foam. Hobbs, the pilot, dry wit, no patience, chuckled as I strapped into the exit harness. Try not to die too fast, Lieutenant. Got a bet? Running back at base. 3 months is the line. Touching concern, Hobbs. Don't get comfortable, she said as the ramp lowered. Population of that planet is about to double. From 0. I stepped onto the dust-coated surface with a hiss of decompression. The sky was washed in amber haze. The landscape, monochrome misery, rust-red stone, sharp ridges, and nothing but wind and grit. Home sweet home, I muttered. It took me 6 hours to set up the base camp. For modular units, quarters, comm center, supply node, atmospheric processor, each one hexagonal, military standard, and soulless. The air inside tasted like recycled plastic and failed ambition. I logged my first entry. Day 1, base established. All systems nominal. Planet as dead as promised. Then I added, observed motion near outcropping, visual anomaly, likely fatigue, or environmental interference. We'll monitor. I stared at those lines a long while before sending the log, because the truth was I had seen something fast, something that shouldn't exist on this so-called dead rock. A flicker, a shadow with legs. And this planet wasn't supposed to have legs. By day 3, I was unraveling. No signals, no storms, no updates, just the rhythmic groan of the filtration system, the twitch of motion sensors cycling through nothingness, and the feeling deep, persistent, that I was being watched. Then the signal came. It started as a whisper in the comms grid, a soft ping, then another. At first, I thought it was a glitch, maybe a solar flare artifact. But no, the signal was under the base. Beneath the very ground I'd parked my sorry exile tent on. I ran diagnostics. No anomalies. Switched bands. Signal gone. Switched back. There it was again. Steady, rhythmic, pulsing like a heartbeat. I froze. That night, I slept in my gear, pulse pistol in hand, eyes wide in the dark. I thought I was here to die of boredom. Instead, something alive had just said hello. By day 4, the silence had weight. It pressed against the habitat walls. It pulled in corners. It clung to the back of my throat. And the signal hadn't stopped. It had evolved. Every 47 seconds, the comms array emitted a pulse, a rhythm, too precise to be random, too organic to be automated, like a language breathing through static. I logged it. I recorded the waveform. I ran it through the translator matrix with 0 results. Then I did it again. Because what else do you do when you're stationed alone on a rock that's supposed to be lifeless, and something beneath you is tapping messages in code? I didn't sleep, didn't eat much either. Instead, I watched the dust, and that's when I saw it again. Late afternoon. Larger sun dipping low. Smaller sun already gone. A shimmer of movement, near the same outcropping where I'd seen the flicker on day 1. But this time it wasn't just a blur. It was purposeful. I grabbed my sidearm and moved out, keeping low. The rock formation was different. Taller, maybe, but that was impossible. I'd scanned the terrain. It was static. I circled it slowly, and then I saw it, embedded into the north-facing side of the rock. Smooth, matte, black. A rectangle, 10 by 5 centimeters, flat against the surface, but out of place like a circuit board jammed into a tree trunk. Definitely not natural, I muttered. I reached for my scanner. The result? No anomaly detected. It read as normal rock, just solid stone. Except I could see it. I could feel it. That was when I stopped being afraid and started being curious. Dangerous shift, I know, but it's the one that always gets you promoted or killed. I took high-resolution photos, video, proximity scans, sent them up the chain with a log entry flagged urgent. I didn't expect a reply until the next scheduled comm window in 72 hours. But someone or something had other plans. That night, as the twin moons rose over the dusty ridge, the signal changed. The 47-second pulse became frantic, like the beat of a hunted animal. The structure in the waveform splintered, recombined, then repeated, over and over. Not random, just desperate. At 0231 local time, the comms array pinged again. Only this time, the source wasn't just below. It was directly beneath my shelter module. I froze mid-step, toothbrush still in hand. Stared at the console like it might bite me. The scanner confirmed it. Movement. A pressure shift in the soil. Small. Circular. Localized. I grabbed my pistol and approached the edge of the shelter platform. At first I saw nothing. Then the dust moved. Not wind. Not erosion. Intent. The grains parted. Slowly at first, then faster, revealing a perfectly round opening, 5 centimeters wide. Too perfect to be natural. And from it, something emerged. Tiny, multi-limbed, iridescent, gone in a blink, scuttling across the ground like a thought-escaping memory. I didn't follow. I didn't move. Because I understood something in that moment, standing frozen under the amber sky, pulse pounding in my ears. This planet wasn't lifeless. It was occupied. By morning, the signal had returned to its original rhythm. Calm. Steady. I fortified the shelter, engaged emergency seals, set motion sensors in concentric rings around the habitat. I deployed the remaining sample traps. And then I sat in the command module and wrote my mission log. Day 4. XP 4327. Observed intelligent movement. Contact event possible. Repeat. Contact event possible. An hour later, I got a reply. Not from the planet. From command. Continue observation. Reinforcement package en route. Do not engage potential entity. Maintain position. It wasn't an extraction. It wasn't a science team. It was reinforcements. That's when I realized I wasn't here to observe. I was the canary, and the mine was just starting to hum. When the reinforcement pod arrived, it didn't bring people. It brought tools. A sleek, angular container the size of a small vehicle slammed down near my outpost at 0600, kicking up a storm of dust like it was trying to warn the planet. I opened it expecting weapons. Instead, I found questions. Advanced scanning gear, subsurface imaging drones, a new comm array with quantum linguistic mapping, and, nestled at the very bottom, a carefully packed crate of plasma charges, marked for subterranean deployment. It wasn't a rescue. It was a containment protocol. Fantastic, I muttered, from babysitting dust to potential xenocide. New personal record. I set up the new scanner array first. Unlike the standard unit, this one had quantum resonance mapping, ground-penetrating radar, and a biometric sonar matrix. The kind of gear you only deploy when you think something intelligent is hiding underground. And that's exactly what it showed. When the scan finished, I didn't speak. I didn't breathe. A three-dimensional map bloomed in the center of my console, a subterranean city, a branching tunnel system, large chambers, air pockets, movement, hundreds, maybe thousands of tiny, fast-moving entities, all flowing through the stone like blood in veins. Not random, not chaotic, organized. This isn't an infestation, I whispered, staring at the pulsating map. It's a civilization. The comm translation array wasn't far behind. I fed it every signal I'd logged since arrival, every pulse, every change in frequency, every erratic shift in pattern. It began correlating tone and timing into syntactic rhythm. A matrix of linguistic scaffolding started to build. The system flagged recurring elements, attention markers, location indicators, alert protocols, and one repeating structure that appeared only after my arrival, likely meaning, "You are here." Not a threat, not a warning, a greeting. I recorded all of it. My voice was tight as I spoke into the mission log. Day 5, XP 4327. Subsurface mapping confirms extensive artificial structures beneath outpost. Signal has shifted, repeating patterns. Sentience possible. Communication attempted. Recommend scientific and diplomatic teams immediately. I paused. My eyes drifted to the unopened crate of plasma charges. Recommend not deploying subterranean weaponry. Then the sensors chirped. Something was coming. I grabbed my pulse pistol and moved to the shelter's main viewport. At first, I saw nothing. Then movement, a procession, 7 figures, small, low to the ground, emerged from the rocky horizon. They moved slowly in a V-shaped formation, not scurrying, not hiding, approaching. The lead figure carried something that shimmered in the light. They stopped 10 meters from the base. The lead one placed the object on the ground and backed away. I zoomed in. It was a pyramid, crystalline, perfect, no larger than a clenched fist. It pulsed softly in a familiar rhythm. 47 seconds. Every instinct screamed, protocol. Do not engage. Do not expose. Do not make contact. But this wasn't protocol anymore. This was first contact. I sealed my helmet, checked my sidearm, and stepped into history. The creatures didn't move. They waited. Up close, they were more beautiful than terrifying, iridescent bodies with 6-jointed limbs, semi-translucent plating that shimmered blue and green and gold in the dust-filled air. I holstered my weapon, mimicked their stance. Kneeling slowly, the lead entity stepped forward, raised 2 of its limbs, and performed a gesture, a series of patterned, deliberate motions. I raised my hands, palms out, and pointed to the pyramid. It stepped back. I reached forward and picked it up. It was warm. It was humming. And it was talking. Back in the shelter, I placed the pyramid on the new translation matrix. Instant spike in data throughput. The system pulsed to life. And suddenly, the language had structure. It wasn't noise. It was a name. The translator displayed it slowly. Stal. They weren't invaders. They weren't predators. They were a people, a hidden people, and they had just made contact with me. The crystal pyramid didn't speak in words. It sang in patterns. Inside the shelter, the new quantum translation array glowed with activity. The moment I connected the pyramid, the signal I'd been chasing for days changed. Richer now, layered, more than just a beat or a pulse. It was language wrapped in mathematics, emotion encrypted in resonance. And for the first time, it didn't feel like I was eavesdropping. It felt like I was being welcomed. The system spat out its first coherent string. We remember. No context, no subject, no object, but it hit like a whisper from beneath the bones of the planet. Outside, the Stal were gone, vanished silently across the dust like ghosts receding into stone. But they had left more than a gift. They had left an invitation, and I accepted. I returned to the rock formation, the spire that had appeared out of nowhere. Now it was glowing ever so faintly, as if the pyramid's activation had stirred something beneath the surface. I walked the perimeter, marked 4 new holes in the ground, evenly spaced. A pattern. They weren't hiding from me anymore. They were testing me, seeing if I could see what they saw. I knelt near one of the new openings and set down a second passive sensor. This one tuned to vibrational harmonics. It picked up sound, not tremors, not seismic activity, a melody, 5 notes, repeated every 47 seconds. Same rhythm as the pulse in the pyramid, same structure as the first transmission. We remember. They weren't just communicating, they were broadcasting memory. Back at the shelter, I fed the signal into the array alongside the pyramid's pattern. The system correlated them, aligned them, and revealed a visual, a chamber, deep underground, vast, alive, lit by flowing crystal veins that pulsed like nervous tissue. There were murals, not paint, light trapped in transparent strata, scenes of shapes that resembled the Stal, smaller, simpler, burrowing, building, watching the sky, and others, larger, violent, falling from orbit in streaks of flame, crashed vessels, shattered debris, the Stal recovering pieces, studying them, and always returning to the same 3 glyphs: memory, depth, warning. I stared at the projection, heart thudding. They hadn't just survived here. They had preserved everything the stars forgot. 3 hours later, the comms system pinged again. A reply from command. Reinforcement team scheduled. 5 days. Initial findings under review. Continue observation. Do not engage. They had no idea what was unfolding here. They still thought this was observation. But I knew better now. This wasn't an archaeological site. This was a living archive. And it had chosen me as its reader. Later that evening, I went outside. The spire was taller now. Where there had been 4 holes, now there were 12, forming a perfect spiral. Light trickled faintly from their edges. Not mechanical, not artificial, organic illumination, as if the planet itself was waking up. I sat on the dust, watching the pattern shift in the pyramid's glow, listening to a language no human had ever heard. And I realized the Stal didn't fear us. They pitted us, because we had forgotten things they had carved into the stone, because we came to space to conquer, and they had come to remember. They returned at dawn, 7 of them again, but not the same. This time they moved with intention, not hesitant, not curious, ceremonial. The leader stepped forward, its iridescent shell reflecting both suns, casting gold and emerald hues across the dust. In its forward limbs, it carried a new object, a crystal rod, long and tapered like a tuning fork. It pulsed faintly in sync with the pyramid still humming on my console. The others carried nothing, but formed a semicircle behind it, a formation of witnesses, a ritual, a gift. I met them halfway across the dust. No weapons, no helmet, just me in a sealed exosuit, heart pounding loud enough to be its own beacon. I knelt again, mimicking their posture. The leader approached, held the rod high, then lowered it gently into my hands. It was warm, alive. I saw something move within the crystal, a shifting lattice of threads like veins of memory. And then the voices began. Not audible, not spoken, transmitted directly into the pyramid on my belt, which began glowing brighter in response. Back in the shelter, I connected the rod to the translation array. The display flared to life instantly. A cascade of glyphs, then images. A cavern illuminated by veins of glowing stone. A humanoid figure, not human, but close, stumbling into the depths, bleeding from a wound. Crashing, dying. The spell surrounding him, not in fear, but in reverence. They preserved the body, studied his suit, salvaged his equipment, then slowly began to understand it. The array processed everything. It translated key terms, labeled the figure Sky Dead, marked the location as the Chamber of Remembrance. I stared at the images and data flashing across the interface. They'd been watching us longer than we knew. They'd been collecting, learning, and they had saved everything we'd forgotten or tried to hide. The rod's data ended with a symbol, a spiral intersecting with a triangle. The system labeled it gift of memory, not weapon, not tool, invitation. Outside, the leader waited. I stepped out, cradling the rod across both hands like a torch. The Sthal lowered their limbs in what I now understood to be respect. And then the leader's shell shifted color, rapid flashes in a precise rhythm. The translator chirped. First speaker receives the memory. First speaker is not Sky Dead. First speaker is Sky Known. I stood motionless, the wind tugging at the edges of my suit. Sky Known. It wasn't a title. It was a role. They had chosen me, not because I was qualified, not because I was trained, but because I had listened, because I had answered the first signal with curiosity instead of violence. Later, back at the console, I updated the mission log. Day 6, XP 4327. Formal gift exchange initiated. Rod artifact received. Contained audiovisual data, cultural encoding, and linguistic primer. Confirmed recognition of myself as a diplomatic figure. Recommendation: immediate dispatch of xenocultural team. Do not deploy force. Then I paused and typed. They've been waiting for someone to speak, and now they've started whispering back. As I stared at the flickering display, the rod pulsed in my hand. A heartbeat, a memory, not of something lost, but of something offered. They brought me underground at dusk. No fanfare, no ceremony, just a nod from the lead Sthal and a gesture toward the crystalline spire, where a spiral of illuminated holes pulsed faintly like the planet's breath. I followed, and the ground opened. The descent was silent. No stairs, no ladders, just an angled tunnel bored into the rock, walls lined with veins of glowing mineral that reacted to our presence, brightening slightly as we passed. The Sthal ahead of me moved effortlessly through the incline. I moved carefully, knees burning, sweat pooling under the suit's collar. Then the passage widened, and the world changed. The chamber of depth was vast, a cathedral carved not by tools, but by intention, every curve engineered, every surface resonant with soft bioluminescence. Crystalline towers stretched from floor to ceiling, humming with faint energy. Pools of fluid shimmered with color that changed based on proximity. Data danced through the stone, glowing glyphs shifting across surfaces like rivers of thought. The Sthal moved through it not as visitors, but as caretakers. This was no shelter. This was home. And every wall sang with memory. The lead Sthal guided me to a platform near the center. As I stepped onto it, the crystal rod in my hand activated, projecting a holographic interface around me. The translator chirped. New data detected. Dozens of icons appeared in a spiral, each representing a specific category of stored knowledge. Biology, astronomy, history, war, language, death. Each one rendered in fluid crystal logic. I reached toward the icon labeled Sky Archive. It opened, and I saw us. Human ships, crashed, broken, preserved. Fragments of Earth language, uniforms, blood. They had saved everything, even our dead. But not just us. Erisien, Dravari, Valinai, dozens of species, all categorized, indexed, remembered. Each encounter with the surface stored like sacred scripture. We are the stone beneath memory, the translator whispered, the Sthal language echoing through the rod's interface. The sky forgets. The stone remembers. They had been gathering our secrets for centuries, not to weaponize, to understand. And as I watched a reconstructed image of an Erisien scout ship spiraling toward the surface, I understood the implication. The Sthal weren't just a civilization. They were an archive of extinction events. And they knew what came after the forgetting. Later, in a smaller chamber, I sat with the lead Sthal, whom I now understood to be more than just a diplomat. Shimmering Path Navigator was the closest approximation. A title, not a name. The navigator gestured to a new projection. This one different. The starfield warped, expanded. Unknown systems lit up. What is this? I asked. The translator paused, then offered two glyphs. Deep sky. Unseen war. The stars shifted again, and a new icon appeared. A weapon. Starfall engine. A device capable of destabilizing a stellar core. Forbidden tech. Beyond anything humans had developed. Something only the Araxians were rumored to be building in secret. The Sthal had the blueprints. And more. Video records of test firings in deep space. Entire systems wiped clean, recorded by scavenge probes. They've already used it, I whispered. Shimmering Path Navigator's colors dimmed in solemn confirmation. The feathered sky warriors discard what they fear. We preserve it, because one day it will return. That night, as I climbed out of the subterranean network and stood once more beneath the stars, I no longer saw a lifeless red world. I saw a vault. I saw a mirror. And I knew, if the Sthal had remained hidden for so long, it wasn't because they were afraid. It was because they were watching, waiting for someone to see the stars the way they did. Not as territory to conquer, but as stories yet to be understood. The next day, Shimmering Path Navigator brought me to a sealed vault beneath the eastern ridge, the Chamber of Sky Relics. No other Sthal followed. This time, it was just us. The passageway was different, tighter, older, carved before they learned to smooth the walls with harmonics. Each turn felt like descending deeper into memory than space. And when the chamber opened, it was not what I expected. A graveyard of history, dozens of alien technologies arranged in methodical reverence. Human drop pods, cracked open like seeds. Erisien scout armor, still stained with something too dark to identify. Unknown race flight cores, humming faintly as if still dreaming. Each relic stood atop raised plinths of woven crystal. Not displayed, preserved. This is where the sky forgot. The translator whispered. And we remembered. We moved slowly through the relics. Each one shimmered with embedded data, fragments of flight logs, encrypted directives, even video loops. One sphere played a single phrase over and over. All records purged. This never happened. I stopped in front of a sealed container, transparent walls filled with glowing crystalline rods like the one I'd been given. Only these pulsed in erratic intervals. These were found inside a vessel buried with intention, the navigator explained. Buried to be lost. I swallowed hard. Inside that container were memory killers. Tech designed not just to delete data, but to emit low-level pulses that corrode biological memory structures. I'd read rumors of this tech, nothing confirmed. The Stal had it, intact, labeled, studied. Why keep this? I asked. Shimmering path navigator's colors shifted slowly to the solemn deep purple I had come to associate with mourning, to protect from it, to know the shape of forgetting, so we may recognize it in others. The answer chilled me, because it meant they weren't just preparing for war. They were preparing for truth to be erased intentionally, and they were guarding against it. Deeper in the chamber, we came upon a strange structure unlike the others, a half-buried Arisian communications node, still flickering with incomplete data streams. I interfaced with it via the crystal rod. What came through wasn't a log. It was a confession. Arisian operatives, whispers of Zactara, what they called XP 4327, descriptions of subterranean readings dismissed by leadership, and one message encrypted and buried deep inside the comm stream. Site not dead. Life signs, sentient, recommend burial. Not investigate. Not first contact. Bury. They'd known. They'd seen the Stal. And they tried to erase them. Again. How long have you known? I asked. Long enough to watch them return. The navigator answered. They come not to see, but to hide. They bury with flame. They erase with silence. I stared at the fragments of truth the Stal had gathered, memories the galaxy had abandoned. And why share it with me? Because you listen, and because they will come again, this time not to bury, but to burn. Back at the outpost, I stared at the containment logs I'd sent to command. I buried the details beneath generic tags. Too dangerous to send unencrypted, too easy to intercept. And as I looked up at the night sky, star fields streaking across the red horizon, I felt it, a presence, the inevitability of discovery, of retaliation. The Stal had preserved truth, but the galaxy, it had built empires on forgetting, and those empires were about to collide with the stone beneath their feet. The Arisian ship didn't appear on sensors. It was just there. 1 minute, I was reviewing geological scans with the Stal, trying to map the extent of their crystalline defense network. The next, the sky had changed. A shadow cut across the twin suns. A dark spear descending from orbit, impossibly fast, improbably silent. Not a warship. A probe cruiser. Arisian diplomatic class. Cloaked. Unmarked. It wasn't here to talk. It was here to verify. By the time it touched down, a full kilometer from the outpost, the Stal had vanished beneath the surface, leaving no trace but shifting dust and a faint, rhythmic hum. I stood alone at the landing zone, armed only with the crystal rod and a diplomatic badge that still had my punishment assignment classification etched in the ID core. 3 Araxians emerged from the cruiser, feathers slicked tight to their exosuits, their ceremonial armor dulled in the Zactaran dust. The leader stepped forward. Lieutenant Richards, it said, no greeting. I didn't answer, just stared at the 3 tall, avian diplomats with every ounce of calm I didn't feel. The Galactic Defense Force claims first contact with an indigenous species. It continued. We have come to dispute this. You're late, I replied quietly. The second Arisian blinked in slow, deliberate disdain. There is no record of sentient life on this world. Your findings are convenient. Convenient. I said, they've lived here for millennia. You've just never looked beneath your own wreckage. The lead diplomat turned slightly. We would like to speak with this species. They would like to speak with someone who doesn't call them convenient. A long pause. Then, without another word, they produced a sealed document chip. This outlines the Arisian Protectorate's formal challenge to the sovereignty of this world. Under Galactic Treaty Clause 17, Article 3, we claim territorial prior presence through strategic omission. I blinked. Strategic omission? The absence of evidence, Lieutenant, is not the evidence of absence. My laughter startled all three of them. Do you hear yourselves? I said, you intentionally buried your secrets here, and now you're mad someone found the vault you forgot to lock. No response, only a twitch of mandibles. Calculating, measuring. I stepped closer. You didn't just dump crash sites. You dumped entire memories. War crimes, forbidden tech, experiments no civilization should ever touch. Those are allegations, not proof, the leader replied. Not anymore, I said, holding up the crystal rod. It pulsed faintly, sinking with the ground beneath me. They remembered everything. The ground shifted. The dust rose. And then they appeared. Stal, dozens of them, stepping out of the ground in a wave of luminous stillness. No weapons, no fear, only presence. And in their midst, shimmering path navigator. The Araxians stepped back, not in fear, in recognition. The Stal diplomat raised one iridescent limb, and light shimmered in the air, a projection fed from the crystal rod. Visuals of the Sky Relics Chamber, the memory killers, the destabilization weapon blueprints, the buried reports, all of it. The Stal had kept the receipts, and now they were reading them aloud. The Arisian delegation was silent. Then the leader turned. We will convey these findings to the Protectorate Council. Do that, I said, and tell them this. The people of Zactara remember. They remember everything. They left without another word. No threats, no negotiation, just silence. The silence of an empire being caught. Later, back at the command shelter, shimmering path navigator stood beside me as we watched the Arisian ship rise into the sky like a shameful ghost. Will they return? I asked. Yes, but not to bury, to burn. Perhaps, it said softly, or perhaps they have begun to remember. I looked out across the red plains, now dotted with Stal crystal spires rising like bones from the dirt. I thought about the silence of dead stars, the weight of forgotten things, and the terrible, beautiful truth the Stal had always known. The sky forgets, but the stone remembers. The Araxians returned in silence, not with warships, with lawyers, a full diplomatic delegation, flanked by neutral observers from the Galactic Council. Their cruiser descended like a judgment, polished and black, casting its long shadow over the red sands of Zactara. But this time, they weren't the ones holding the upper hand. This time, they had come to answer. Inside the new diplomacy chamber, carved by Stal artisans in crystalline curves and deep harmonic tones, the mood was not aggressive. It was tense, measured. Every word weighed like a blade. Across from me stood the head Arisian delegate, resplendent in formal regalia designed to distract from the weight of history. Beside him, Admiral Riven of the Galactic Defense Force, human, silent, unreadable, and flanking them both, shimmering rows of Stal, glowing gently in anticipation. At the center stood the truth, a rotating projection of the memory archives, artifact scans, weapon schematics, burial logs, surveillance footage, unedited, unavoidable. These records, the Arisian delegate said finally, are circumstantial. Shimmering Path Navigator's colors pulsed in slow, deliberate disagreement. Circumstance does not explain intent. Debris does not bury itself in geometric patterns aligned with planetary shadow cycles. These were deliberate. Our government never authorized. Then your government is either blind, I interrupted, or complicit. The room fell still. Admiral Riven finally spoke. We've corroborated Stahl findings with data extracted from the captured Arisian ground forces and disabled ships. There is no longer any doubt. He turned toward me. Your report, Lieutenant. Captain, I corrected. Pending confirmation. Riven allowed a rare smile. Duly noted. The negotiation lasted hours. The Araxians shifted tactics from denial to obfuscation to reluctant admissions. But the Stahl never flinched. Each deflection was answered with a data stream. Each denial with a glowing relic. Each omission with a quiet but devastating piece of preserved history. And when the delegation finally exhausted its counterarguments, Shimmering Path Navigator stepped forward and delivered the final blow. A crystalline orb, glowing faintly in rhythmic pulses. This contains your own words. It said, voice like wind through glass. A directive from your high command, buried beneath encryption, recovered from the wreckage you left behind. The directive reads, preserve nothing. Erase what sees. It was over. No counterpoint. No appeal. Just the slow, creaking realization that the Stahl hadn't just exposed a policy. They'd exposed a philosophy. A civilization built not on remembrance, but on control. That night, the Council issued its preliminary judgment. Zactara was to be recognized as sovereign territory of the Stahl. The Arisian Protectorate would face full sanctions pending review. All buried war technologies were to be cataloged, neutralized, and, where possible, destroyed under the oversight of a joint Stahl-GDF delegation. And for the first time in galactic history, a species once believed extinct would hold a seat at the diplomatic table. I returned to the surface alone, stood where the first crystal spire had risen weeks ago. The sky above me churned with stars, but for the first time, I didn't see them as a frontier. I saw them as witnesses. Behind me, Shimmering Path Navigator approached in silence. The sky speaks again, it said, but it now speaks more carefully. Because it remembers, I asked. The Stahl rippled with colors of agreement. Because it fears being remembered. I turned back to the horizon. The dust beneath my boots no longer felt dead. It felt archival. And the sky, it wasn't just space. It was a confessional. The day the flag was raised, the sky was quiet. No warships, no negotiations. Just the wind brushing across the Zactran plains, and the twin suns painting the world in crimson and gold. We stood together, Stahl, human, and representatives from half a dozen star systems. Not because we were ordered, but because something had changed. Something we all felt, even if few would say it aloud. The flag itself was unlike anything flown before. Not woven fabric, not a digital projection. It was alive. A crystalline weave forged from Stahl memory strands and human polymer threads, encoded with fragments of shared history. Each strand shimmered with data, and in the right light, you could glimpse moments. The landing, the first contact, the tribunal, the truth, etched into the wind. Colonel Way stood beside me, crisp in full dress uniform, his expression half stern, half proud. You look ridiculous in those boots, he muttered without looking at me. They're ceremonial, I replied. You gave me the promotion. And I regret it every day, he deadpanned, but I saw the ghost of a smile at the corner of his mouth. The honor guard formed a silent line, human marines in polished armor, flanked by Stahl honor sentinels whose scales shimmered in synchronized patterns. Admiral Riven, stood beside the Galactic Council envoy, both silent as the flag was brought forward. Shimmering Path Navigator stepped beside me, the wind gently rippling its iridescent form. "Do you understand what this moment means, First Speaker?" it asked low and clear. "I think I'm starting to." The sky watched us and forgot, but now it will remember, because we have carved memory into motion. I took the flag in both hands, heavy despite its appearance, as if memory itself bore weight. The style had embedded elements of their own discarded shell material, each fragment shed during their growth cycle. Symbolic, sacred, from humanity, traces of wreckage, metals recovered from the first crashed probes, not as scars, but as threads, a bridge forged from ruin. As I hoisted the flag into position, silence swept across the assembly, then a whisper of motion, a pulse of color from the style, a breath held by the humans. The flag caught the wind. It shimmered, blue, silver, red, gold. Then it shifted. Its surface rippled with encoded memories. And for the briefest moment, every species watching saw the same thing. A kneeling human beside alien figures. A gift held out. A history retrieved from dust. A future forged from mutual memory. Applause came. Muted, staggered, but real. Way saluted. Riven nodded. The style pulsed bright and unified. The Arisian observers remained still, but they watched, and that, for now, was enough. As the gathering dispersed, Shimmering Path Navigator remained beside me, staring up at the waving flag. "The sky will change," it said. "We changed it," I replied. "Because we remembered," it said. "Because we refused to forget," I corrected. The style bowed its head slightly, and I understood. This wasn't a monument to victory. It was a promise that no buried truth would stay hidden, that memory would stand unshaken, that the sky would be held accountable, and for the first time in centuries, a planet forgotten by maps was remembered by name. Zactara, home of memory, home of the first flag raised not in conquest, but in truth.